Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's a Victory Day special today, and we are here with a live stream for you. A bit of an impromptu one, as we are looking at, of course, the Victory Day celebrations that took place today in the Russian Federation, which, of course, included representatives from places as diverse, shall we say, as China, Laos, Vietnam, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and of course you had guests there from Venezuela, from Brazil, and from Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traore was there, and a host of others as well. Now, the there are many important things about this. First of all, the sheer scale of the parade was very, very significant, but also the big triumph for the Russian government was the large level of others from foreign countries who are there, and this is very significant because you've now got basically all of the imperialist press in the Western world who are essentially admitting that their bid to isolate Russia has completely and utterly failed. That their strategy lies essentially in ruins, and that they have absolutely no chance of making this work anymore. And you get like mournful statements like that which was put out there by a certain Mr. Timothy Garton Ash, who was crying in the pages of the Financial Times that it was all over for the West, but you won't know how good you had it, and we'll be looking at all that when we're joined in a few minutes by our comrade and friend Kit Clarenburg, who will be joining us for a quick commentary on this, and we're going to be looking at the implications of what's gone on here. So I will just say a few words though before Kit joins me, just on the historical significance of this, because of course the victory parade you see before you today, even though it's been, of course, restored to a much bigger and more significant event than it has been, than it was back in the 90s, when, of course, it was the Yeltsinites attempted to wither it away entirely. It is as nothing when compared to the gigantic parades of the old Soviet period. And it is to that period now that I will just turn briefly to say that the great victory that the Soviet people achieved over Hitlerite fascism was a victory not just of the Russian nation, as some like to call it, but a victory of the Soviet nation, a nation containing many nationalities, who were bound together as one in defense of that nation. So it included many representatives of nations which are now ruled by compradors and fascists, such as the Baltic states. There were numerous Latvian, Lithuanian, and Estonian heroes of the Soviet Union. There were, of course, millions of Ukrainians who fought in the Red Army in the Great Patriotic War. And the fact that the Red Army was able to win against the combined forces, lest we forget, of all of Europe. It wasn't just the Hitlerites in Germany. It wasn't just them. They were the bulk of the forces, but you get fascist forces from all over Europe, from Spain, from France, from Belgium, from the Netherlands, from the Nordic countries. Of course, the significant group of them from Italy, significant army from Italy. You have the Eastern European fascist states, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, um, sending representatives there. You have all kinds of fascist forces, and you have the entire industrial weight of Europe, barring Britain, being turned against the Soviet Union. And of course, the Soviet Union still prevailed. And they prevailed essentially because of the strength of socialism, because of the strength of the proletariat and peasantry and their uh, shall we say, an alliance genuinely made of steel, and it became near unbreakable. And it was the fighting spirit, the ingenuity, and the determination of the great Soviet people which actually brought them to victory. If we compare it to what happened in World War One, where the Tsarist state not only disintegrated, but also its army dissolved into nothing and revolted and refused to fight anymore. You don't get that in World War Two, and no, it's not as anti-communists say, because the NKVD were all stood there with a machine gun behind everybody. That would have been that was what happened in the Tsarist era, and that you can't make an army fight that way. You can make men stand for a while and fight that way, but you can't make a state stand and fight against overwhelming massive pressure. You can't make a people make the kind of sacrifices the Soviet people made just by application of brute force. That's what the Tsar tried to do, and it failed. No, the Soviet people, the great and heroic Soviet people, fought to the very end, which is the till they got to Berlin, and that pathetic, ballless little freak of a failed watercolor artist shot himself in his bunker like a coward, like the coward he always was, and they fought to the point where they destroyed Hitlerite fascism completely and forced its total capitulation. And they were able to do that because of the strength of the alliance between the proletariat and peasantry and the spirit of the revolution, which lived within the heart of the great masses of the Soviet nation. And also because it was a dictatorship of the proletariat back then. That's why the workers and peasants fought so hard for their country. It wasn't just because of the savagery of the Hitlerites, though that was part of it. It was because of the strength of the revolution and the fact that the proletariat and peasantry knew they were fighting for a nation which was genuinely theirs. It didn't belong to any czar or any bourgeois. It was their nation. They were shaping its future, and that's why they fought for so hard and so long. And now we bring in, live from the once and future Yugoslavia, it's Kit Clarenburg. Who will be joining us now. All right, just making sure that he's on here. It's the first time we've done this on Rumble Studio, so you'll have to forgive me if this takes a little while to do. Let's see. I'm hoping this works. Right, bear with me just a moment. All right, let's just see. We will be, yeah, I've just added him in here. All right. Yeah, this is where the live stuff somewhat falls to pieces sometimes, because then you get Rumble Studio being awkward and being a bit unwieldy, which of course it is sometimes. Yeah. Right. So Yeah, I'm just going to keep talking until this technical issue resolves itself. Let me just see here. Right. So, as I was saying, I'm just trying to sort out the technical details here behind the scenes. The way in which, of course, this is presented in the histories of the West is that this is the victory of the Soviet Union in World War II was all down to the fact that it was the evil Beria was standing behind everybody with a machine gun in a machine gun nest. There's the lie that Stalin, of course, panicked and ran away for 5 days or so after the beginning of the invasion. Beria had to execute like thousands of people just to cheer him up again. The usual type of stuff. All, of course, garbage, and proven now to be garbage because, of course, one of the things that the collapse of the Soviet Union did do was it declassified lots of things that had previously been under lock and key, which is, of course, the diary of Stalin, the diary of like his events and stuff like that, which revealed that he was constantly working. So all the way through this. So we've still got more technical issues here. Just bear with me a moment. So yes, it revealed that he was working all the way through the days after the invasion. He didn't run away, didn't hide drunk under a table. And now we have a representative of Socialist Yugoslavia joining us. It's Mr. Kit Clarenburg. Good evening, sir.
Hey, how's it going? I think the technical issues may have been on my end because I'm a total moron. So, apologies, Rumble. But no, it is my absolute pleasure to be joining you for this, Alex. And I thought it was worth just having a good old dwell on some of the absolutely appalling takes on Victory Day that we're seeing emanating from the usual suspects, but also an opportunity to reflect on how, on top of an amazing political and visual spectacle, I think that the Victory Day parade in Russia, it represents the christening of the multipolar world.
Yes.
It is quite clear that there is a new world in town all round, and leaders, no matter how delusional in the West, are either getting to grips with this now at last, or are kind of realizing that they need to. And there are governments and populations who aren't on board with the unipolar US-led Western world domination, and it has been writ very large throughout the day, and it's very clear from a lot of the takes as well that yes, that people are slowly but surely getting to grips with this. Now, I mean, speaking from Serbia, which of course is what would you call it? A key battleground between East and West in Europe. And has historically been so as well. Kaya Kallas, the deranged former Lithuanian prime minister and Nazi spawn, she is now the EU's foreign policy chief, and she openly threatened European leaders with severe consequences if they attended. In Serbia's case, she said, she and a number of other people said, well, Serbia's EU membership will have to be taken off the table. And for the 10% of the population who actually support this and support Belgrade becoming part of the EU, I'm sure they were very upset. The other 90% saw it as a threat of a good time. Okay,
Yes.
But it's not only Vucic. It's not only Vucic who dared defy Kaya Kallas. It was Robert Fico. Now, we've spoken a lot about Robert Fico. You and I both on Decline and Fall, but also on some previous episodes. Robert Fico not only made abundantly clear that he was going to attend, he has issued this amazing statement, which I'm going to read in full. It is a letter addressed to Kaya. Dear Kaya, once again, I have taken note of your statements directed at me in connection with today's visit to Moscow and the announced meeting not only with the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. You claim I am supposedly not on the right side of history or make other similarly profound geopolitical remarks. First, I am in Moscow to pay tribute to more than 60,000 soldiers of the Red Army who died liberating Slovakia. I do not see what these brave individuals have to do with the current international situation. Second, as a high-ranking official of the European Commission, you have absolutely no authority to criticize the sovereign prime minister of a sovereign country who approaches all European matters constructively. Third, I disagree with the policy of the new Iron Curtain, which you are working on so intensively. Fourth, I ask you, how can diplomacy and foreign policy be conducted if politicians are not supposed to meet and engage in normal dialogue on issues where they hold differing views? A more eloquent and kind of measured "fuck you" I would be hard pressed to draft myself.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Because it's over. I mean, you and I discussed this on an episode a couple of weeks ago, which people should really go and check out, called EU Walls Come Tumbling Down. And then there was another one basically chronicling the decline and fall of the EU the previous week. Do be sure to go and watch those. It's over. Like the idea of a centralized EU, the idea of like the EU being this great super state with a central command point in Brussels, it's gone. It's done. It's over. Fico knows it. Vucic, for all his slipperiness on this question, knows it. It's over. And the fact that you have a manifest moron like Kaya Kallas and a corrupt moron like von der Leyen trying to lecture people on where they should go and what they should do, and everyone's ignoring them, just says that this is over, and everyone's just beginning to realize it now. Did you want to go to, because I know you're going to enjoy this one, did you want to go to the morning of Timothy Gartnash?
Yeah. Could I just really quickly as well, just make a point on what Fico wrote about how the 60,000 Red Army soldiers who helped liberate Slovakia from Nazi occupation. Okay, it is like here we are seeing the two very different conceptions of World War II meet in Western capitals and in Moscow. Okay, so Moscow is, and this feeds into some stuff that we'll get into later. They are commemorating the actual history of World War II, right? Which was a struggle between communism and fascism, which communism comprehensively won. Britain and America, for all of their evangelizing and romanticizing of their contributions to World War II, and they're very effective means of conveying this via Hollywood and TV serials. They played walk-on roles. It was the Red Army, and it was working class communists and socialists and revolutionaries who fought and died to destroy fascism. Now, to give you just a local example of most of the names of these people are largely unknown, if not entirely unknown in the West. To give you one example, right, of again, in local terms, there was a young Serb partisan, Lepa Radic, right? She was captured by the fascist Ustasha and held in a concentration camp, which was a death camp in occupied Yugoslavia. She managed to escape. At the age of 15, she joined the partisans. She was captured fighting in a battle with the Nazis. She was brutally tortured for several days, trying to get her to turn over the names of fellow partisans and other intelligence. She refused, and then they decided to hang her. And when she was on the gallows, they gave her one last chance to reveal the names of her collaborators, and she said, "You'll find out who they are when they come and kill you." Okay, right? Like this, the World War II was a fight for survival for Slavs. That is the reality of it. D-Day, all this other, the North Africa campaign. It was a sideshow to what happened in Central and Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union.
Well, let's also just add in. I mean, we've mentioned this before, but the aim of the Nazis was to create a giant slave empire in the East. That's what they wanted. I mean, all the racial theories were essentially just cheap justifications for enslaving Poles, Slavs of all descriptions, the Soviets, and it was, of course, an anti-communist war. So, as Kit says, the people who sacrificed the most were workers and peasants in the east of Europe and the Soviet Union. And the reason why they could do that was, in large part, was because of their belief in the socialist future, and that they would recreate their nations to be stronger and to be genuinely ruled by them after the defeat of the fascists. And lest we forget, the domestic collaborators as well, people like Ante Pavlich, people like Krasnov, people like Vlasov. And
People like Kalat's grandparents.
Yeah, and von der Leyen's Nazi
yes.
as well. But so this is who the war was against, and as we have frequently said on the show, this is who came back in 1991, who slithered out of exile in the US and Canada and Britain, who've been on the MI6 and CIA payroll for 70 fucking years, 80 years now. This is who runs these Eastern European states. And I was saying just before you came on, there were many heroes of the Soviet Union that came from Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and they all originated from the working class and the peasantry. It was the scumbag landlords and capitalists who were collaborators with the Germans and who ran SS battalions and who run SS memorial marches now. And the big mistake of mistake or crime of the people like Khrushchev was that they allowed Kalas's family to slither into the Communist Party, where they spread their rot around when they should have just been relegated to the lowest possible position or just sent over to their friends in the United States. But we could go on, but we have a lot of ground to cover today. So, do you want to turn to the act of mourning of our favourite imperial columnist, Mr. Garton-Ash?
Yes, Timothy Garton-Ash. Just for viewers who are unfamiliar, he's never. I'm not sure how he styles himself, whether it's a journalist or a historian. He is a writer of a lot of very crap things. He's written about the worst book imaginable about East Germany, which is a very competitive category. He supports the He supports fascist collaborators, as we've been discussing, in Central and Eastern Europe. He was a rabid tub thumper for quote unquote liberal interventionism. And now he has written on the occasion of Russia's victory parade a op-ed for the Financial Times in which he admits the gig is up. Brace for disorder as the great power shift begins. He starts off in typically pretentious style with a poem. I'm not even going to bother reiterating it, but he states, as we pass the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, every day brings further evidence that a remarkably long-lived US-led international order is over. Everyone is now scrambling to work out what might succeed it. A new multipolar order, spheres of influence, a worldwide version of the 19th century concert of Europe. Like if Garton Ash, of all people, is saying this, then, alarm bells are ringing in every Western capital, across every corridor of power, every force of repression, be that the CIA, MI6, the British and American governments, their domestic apparatus of repression and propaganda, they are all absolutely terrified. Okay, it's very clear that they've finally gotten to grips with what has been evident to anyone paying attention ever since China and Russia signed their No Limits partnership, that we're living in a different world. Garton Ash predicts that there's going to be a quote unquote prolonged and dangerous period of global disorder. I don't think so. I think we're going to see the turbocharged growth of BRICS, of alternatives to US dominated payment systems, and this is all going to develop as a parallel to the US order. As Arnaud Bertrand, friend of the show, who we're hoping to get on for a longer form discussion about the realities of modern day communist China, he has a great phrase, which is, if we ask people to choose, other countries in the global south to choose between the East and West, the West may not like the answers. And I think that we've seen this since the very beginning of the special military operation, that we've heard a lot about how, Putin is winning the propaganda war in the global south because the global south support Russia. And they understand that the forces with which Russia is at war, which is the same forces that have repressed and oppressed and slaughtered them for centuries.
Yes, indeed. And as the Independent newspaper shows us in its coverage of this, they've just discovered that the Russians are actually winning the propaganda war. And this is what has been going on now for over 3 years. It becomes obvious that the West, when they kept screaming that Russia was isolated, they were only accurate in terms of the fact that it is isolated from them. But they are the great minority in the world. And what they lack in numbers, they make up for in arrogance, short-sightedness, stupidity, and chauvinism. But you have, as I was saying at the top of the program, you have representatives there from like countries such as China, Laos, Vietnam. You have Cuba, you have Venezuela, you have Brazil, you have the Burkinabes, you have Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, you have the Egyptians there. You have like all, other than like the Western states, you have all the Central Asian former Soviet states. You have Azerbaijan, you have Armenia, two places where the British have tried to make all kinds of moves over the last 30 years, and yet they haven't broken the Azerbaijanis away from Russia completely. Nor did the Pashinyan gambit pay off for them in a major way, because he's there. And, for all of his uselessness and treachery. The only ones missing, of course, are Ukraine and the Baltic states, because Belarus was there as well. So you have like these huge numbers of guests there representing gigantic amounts of the population of the world. It's done. It's over. This was like the final hurrah. and it's not only over; it's over in a way that, like, even the belligerent idiots like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump know that it is, but don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and I think as well that, like, I mean, on on the subject of yes, like a new international order. I mean, I have seen over and over and over again in mainstream Western reporting on this that, like, Putin has re-emerged on the world stage. Russia has come out from the cold, as it were, and as you said, the only part of the world that Russia has been isolated from is Europe and North America, and that is an
Yes.
elective choice that those countries made. And I think if you think back, and it's I mean it is a long time it is a long time ago now in every way. But when this all kicked off, and that, like, the, like, Russian ballets were being banned, and the letter Z was being banned in European countries, and we were being told that never has the international community, quote unquote, been so united. Think about how far we are away from that kind of tone, emanating both from, like, quote unquote journalists, but also think tank pundits, and Western governments. Now, again, and relatedly, on the subject of other the countries being represented there. Yulia Mendel, who was a former New York Times contributor and was also a speechwriter for Zelensky, she posted this absolutely astonishing tweet that was flagged by the mighty Mark Ames. I strongly urge our viewers to go back to read what Mark Ames was writing in the late 2000s, around the time of the Russo-Georgian War, about Russian resurgence and the risk that this is going to, one way or another, lead to the end of the U.S. empire, which is just, like, eerily prescient. Yulia Mendel says, Putin has radically reimagined the meaning of this parade. Once a commemoration of victory over fascism in World War II, it is no longer about the past. It stands today as a symbol of his vision for the future. Troops from China, Vietnam, Kazakhstan, and other nations, countries with little historical connection to World War II, now march in Moscow together. Like, the level of historical ignorance and racism contained, and in just sheer idiocy contained in those words, is absolutely extraordinary. One of the famous picture of the Red Army raising the hammer and sickle over the Reichstag as they took Berlin. One of the soldiers was from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan lost as many people in World War II as the US did. Okay, just as one example, China was subject to an attempted almost total genocide by the Japanese, and that's where World War II started. Was in
In
China.
1931, by the way.
Yes, in 1931, Vietnam, the Viet Minh, which was communist dominated, again, working class peasantry from Vietnam, fought against Japanese invasion. They fought against Vichy French occupation of their country, and they vanquished them. It is a huge. I mean, they just had their annual celebration of booting the Americans out. Which was quite the spectacle, with children recreating the tanks bursting through the gates of the grand presidential palace, built in what was called Saigon and is now rightfully called Ho Chi Minh City. Like, there is a Western-centric view of the war, which is, yeah, it was D-Day and that was it. Like,
Yeah.
it is astonishing, actually, and these are people who are theoretically, at least, in positions of power and influence, and they actually believe this.
Oh yeah. Well, this is a view of the world that's, like, so dumb. It's like, even like the works of a propagandist like Anthony Beaver aren't this stupid.
No.
This is like this is like sort of coked up Guardian readers ranting and raving about how the British won the war with a soundtrack by The Clash or something because they've all been watching SAS Rogue Heroes or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the product of like 80 years of propaganda from like Hollywood and from Britain, and this is what it produces, which is a completely demented belief in like what World War II actually was. Now, the you shared with me some other stuff in terms of lunatic takes on this, including our old friends from Germany and certain fascist organizations hanging out in concentration camps and doing an analysis of the modern day Battle of Kursk, which shows a phenomenal amount of historical ignorance and foolishness. But again, like this is what happens when you get the view of history that the idiots, well, the fascist types that run the Baltic states put out there, which was that, oh, fascism and communism are the same. Oh, but communism is worse. This is what happens, which you end up with a fascist staring at a concentration camp and saying never again. Oh, but by the way, the communists did this. But again,
Yeah, I mean,
go on.
just to give like a massive shout out to like Moss Robeson, who's just this indefatigable documenter of new and old Ukrainian sympathies for Nazism and the profusion of neo-Nazism in modern Ukraine, particularly in the military. I mean, this is just absolutely astonishing, and I think that the as I wrote recently, shameless plug for my website, throughout the 1930s, but particularly in 1939, the British were attempting to forge a global empire with the Nazis, right? So this is not only a historical reality which has been completely memory hold, to an astonishing extent, but like you got to understand. Not that I need to tell you, Alex, that Western institutions are effectively not even embracing, they're almost to the point of legislating in favor of myths like double genocide perpetuated by Wehrmacht and SS collaborators and Holocaust perpetrators in countries that the Red Army liberated. Like it's really so in 2009 the European Parliament instituted an annual commemoration every August 23rd to mark the European Day of Remembrance for victims of all totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, and this referred to the quote unquote victims of communism and put them on a par with the victims of Nazism. This is like as I say, like they've as good as legislated that communism, which destroyed Nazism, was as bad, if not worse. And the announcement that accompanied the inauguration of this perverse anniversary, it focused primarily on purported Soviet crimes. Like
Yes.
it was absolutely unreal. I mean, recently, I believe it might have been last summer, the Keir Giles, who's this British Ministry of Defence apparatchik and a very shady individual. I'm fairly sure that he has worked or does work for MI6, and for a while was attempting to troll me in the most infantile manner on Twitter imaginable. He seems to have given that up because nobody found it funny. He just came across looking like a dick. Excuse me. He authored for Politico an article which basically stated, well, the Waffen the SS collaborators in the Baltic states, well, you got to cut them some slack because they had a difficult choice between communism and Nazism.
Yeah, well, he looks like he's made his choice.
Yeah, well, exactly, and you've got to bear in mind as well that like the collaborators in these countries, it was likely that they would be killed once if the Nazis had prevailed over the Soviet Union. It's likely they would have been killed too. Like under General Plan Ost, the Nazis had percentages for every single country of, in terms of the local population that was going to be exterminated or moved to Siberia. I believe in Lithuania it was like 85%. So like all of these people, like there was no difficult choice there to make at all,
No.
apart from people wanting to maintain their privilege.
Yes,
And,
for a
and,
few
and
more years,
yeah,
until the
yeah,
Nazis decided that they outlived their usefulness and killed them anyway, or sent them to a slave labor camp, which is what they would have done. The other other interesting things that came about was the overall, I would say, very pathetic non-celebration of what used to be called VE Day in Britain, which was as crap as you'd expect when it's overseen by Sir Keir Starmer, a man who could drain the enthusiasm out of any situation. And like I remember the VE Day celebrations all the way back in 1995, when my parents took me to some military march in, I think it was Liverpool, and these were like big and significant events. And really, what has happened over the last like 30 years is that the British government's just let that kind of slide away, because fundamentally the British government it will use World War II for propaganda purposes, but it probably doesn't want people to look too closely at World War II because there might be all kinds of unfortunate realities they might stumble onto, such as who was the third power in the Anglo-American amazing alliance, who did the most of the actual fighting. So you get like a crap military parade in London with 11 Azov men following following the cavalry and literally marching through horse shit. You have like Timothy Spall reading out a speech from Churchill, and then you have like a street party of about 5 people and a dog.
yeah.
This is
If you just scroll down, because this is just hilarious. So like, on screen now is a picture of one of and bear in mind that the British government encouraged, like they've made an official announcement encouraging street parties, and you can see the examples. There's about 10 people there in the middle of
yeah,
nowhere, like in some armpit of a town in the middle of nowhere. Like
yeah,
and it's just like you strike upon something very interesting, which is the British like fetishize World War II, and as we've discussed, Ian, their fantasy romantic visions of World War II inform their modern military strategy. The Krinky incursion, to name but one British planned catastrophe that ranks among one of the worst military disasters in modern history, where a wave after wave of poorly British trained, ill-equipped troops were sent on high-speed ribs with no air cover to attempt to seize a beachhead in Russian-occupied Kherson, and they spent 9 months sending people there. Most people who were sent there got killed before they even reached the beachhead. People who got there were killed on arrival. There was a BBC report in December when this had been going on for I think it was 2 or 3 months, where someone fighting in this basically said, we've got no idea what we're doing, we can't evacuate people, we're not getting basic supplies, we are under constant flamethrower, artillery, drone and glide bomb fire. This was the British thought that Krinky would be an opportunity to recreate D-Day, and it would result in the Ukrainians marching on Crimea and outright victory. Okay, so
yes,
like they're willing to, on the one hand, they fetishize the British role in World War II, but they also, as you say, don't want people actually looking too hard at what happened and why,
hmm.
and who was actually doing the fighting and dying all along. There was a poll that was published in June 2024 of British citizens, which found that less than 2/3 of respondents, and this is of all ages, could even place D-Day as having happened in World War II. I think it was something like 48% of British people thought that the UK had done the most to defeat the Nazis versus like 2% for the Soviet Union. You
Well,
know, it's crazy. It's completely crazy. But yeah.
that's what you get when your version of history is basically a cartoon. Now, talking of crap British plans, I'm willing to bet that the mass drone attacks on Moscow was definitely cooked up by somebody from the British MI6 or British military non-intelligence, and the threats to the victory parade, the Victory Day parade in Moscow. My guess is that Zelensky was making those at the behest of his handlers, mainly in London, because he's an actor who doesn't have any agency whatsoever. He reads lines that are prepared for him. And the lines that were prepared for this were clearly, this is my speculation, prepared by his London handlers. And so they tried in various ways to disrupt this. It all failed, and it all came across looking pretty pathetic, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it's like I think that what particularly, what sparked my antenna twitching that this was the British was there was an attempt to again launch a incursion into Kursk on May 7th, which got pretty brutally beaten back. Kursk, again, another catastrophic military failure that was planned, directed, managed, and overseen by the British, and was using, and Ukrainians used British equipment, and the purpose was to try and normalize direct Western involvement, overt Western involvement in the war. That got after some pretty brutal battles that got completely neutralized. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians killed, injured, crippled for life, captured as prisoners of war. There was also, yes, this drone swarm where 500 excuse me, there was in excess of 500 drones were launched on Moscow, and this was reported as, oh, Ukraine has been paralyzing Russian airspace. Actually, all of these drones got shot down by
Mm-hmm.
Russian air defenses. And it's we have Simplicius the Thinker, who is a great military blogger. If his posts do tend to be a bit long-winded, but they're still worth the wait, as it were. He quotes a top Ukrainian analyst who bemoaned the success of Russian defenses. He states that for two, if not 2.5 years, some people have been saying we should launch 500 of our Shaheeds into the swamps, which is to say Russia, and blow everything up there. As you can see, they didn't blow everything up. For this, hundreds of thousands of drones are probably needed and thousands of cruise and ballistic missiles, which Ukraine doesn't have. Russia has strong air defenses that are difficult to bypass, and the Russians are very quickly learning to counter Ukraine's massive drone raids. Now, drones are meant to be like Ukraine's first and last line of defense now, because they've run out of ammunition, they've run out of shells, they've run out of Western equipment, and the West doesn't have any more to give them, really. At this stage. So, it was a complete waste of time. It cost the Ukrainians a lot for zero gain, and the parade continued unhindered. I might add that this was after, Zelensky, you mentioned, openly stated that he couldn't guarantee the safety of Xi Jinping in Moscow. I mean, like, the response, if there was even the vaguest risk of any attendee, let alone Xi Jinping, who was sat next to Putin the entire time, and was greeted. They greeted each other very warmly. The counter response to that would have been absolutely enormous. So I
Yeah.
think that, the Ukrainians are in a sense lucky that it was a total disaster.
Well, and also they to make up for this, and I thought they might do it. They tried another suicide run into Kursk just a day ago,
Yeah,
to launch some other, like, completely idiotic PR offensive with no value to it whatsoever, other than some idiot British officer being able to say we ruined Putin's parade, which you didn't.
Mm,
You just got a load
mm.
more Ukrainians killed. So again, it comes back to this point, which is that these British military planners, they're crap. They don't. They all they know how to do is to cook up bizarre PR victories that don't even turn into PR victories, that are based on, as we have said over and over again, a view of military history and a view of military practice, which just seems so cartoonish because it's based on this incredibly poor understanding of history, which is one thing when your cartoonish view of history is being put out there to the masses to mislead people. That's one thing. But when you start believing it yourself, it's like the old line from Scarface: don't get high on your own supply. And the British military cadre officers and the British intelligence men seem to be very high on their own supply at the moment. But that comes from living in what I will call the kingdom of fear and illusions, which is all that this country is now. Have we run through everything now, or did you want to do any final comments on this, Kit?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just think that, yeah. Overall, as I said at the start, this is the very, very clear public coming out party for the multipolar world, and I think that the everything that we've discussed, but even just small things like Vucic, the Serbian president, attending, despite threats and despite significant speculation that he wouldn't go, and Fico just giving the EU the finger, as we discussed, yes, on our prior Decline and Fall installments. The EU is finished now. Its members are in open rebellions. This will grow and grow and grow. Their central power is virtually nil at this point. They have they're all out of honey. All they have is vinegar, and even then, it's empty. Countries understand that for all of the bluster and for all of the sound and fury and threats, actually, the EU cannot twist their arm, and they're going to increase. I think we're going to see increasingly more and more countries not dancing to the EU's tune. Up to and including potential secession. This is where the entire project is unraveling at a rate of knots without anyone really noticing. And it's little data points like that point to it. And with any luck, for all of Timothy Garton Ash's catastrophizing about how there's going to be this prolonged and dangerous period of global disorder, I actually think that we're looking at a much more peaceful, much more equitable, and much more stable world once the birthing pains of multipolarity are done with. The war in Ukraine is one such birthing pain. It will end with Ukraine's total defeat, and in turn, the defeat of all of the agencies and militaries and governments that back them secretly and openly. That puts the future of NATO in the balance as well. So it was Steven Seagal's appearance aside, I think that this was a deeply serious point in modern history and will be remembered as such.
Yes, this is the point where everybody realizes there are alternatives to EU, IMF, World Bank, WTO, and all of those organizations will wither away, and the power of the US-led and British-led order will go with it. So, and all it remains for us to do now is to bring down the ruling class in perfidious Albion itself. And of course, in the good old US of A. So we best get on with it. Not to beat around the bush. It's time to bring down the monster from within. Right. Kit Clarenburg from a multipolar Serbia. Thank you for joining me tonight for Victory Day. And we honor the memory and the sacrifice of the workers and peasants of the great and victorious Red Army and the partisan movements. Long may we honor them. Good night.
Damn right, comrade. Thank you. Take care, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Right, that was our Victory Day special. We hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back with you again next week. But until then, I will say good night and solidarity.